Something a little different tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, after an election, we always talk to the winners, which is the normal thing to do. And I'm sure that I'm sure even in this season, we'll probably talk to Gabe Amo, who is the winner of the congressional race, the race that I think we never should have had, but had to suffer anyway. But tonight we're going to do something different. We're going to talk to this gentleman. Here was the headline when he announced that he was running, and a lot of people, including me, said, who is this guy? I don't know him. He did his tour of media like most good candidates should. Here's an example of one.
The greatest threat to our country today isn't from abroad. I think it's from within. A partisan division is really making it harder for working families to pay the bills, for the ability to defend a woman's right to choose, to keep our kids and communities safe, and to protect our planet and rising costs. I mean, hardworking families and small businesses are just getting hammered by high costs.
So, you know, not easy to do that. Still wanted to hit on the headline that eventually showed us the victory. We'll introduce Walter here in a second, but this was the headline announcing Gabe Amo as the winner of this race. What camera? There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay. Stutter step start to the broadcast today. It's all right. My week's been like that anyway. Gabe Amo wins Democratic primary, as we know. We talked with Gabe on the radio the day after, and I'm sure he'll be up here pretty soon. Here's the elections results that were somewhat surprising to the pundits, but there's all sorts of dynamics that we talked about last week, if you missed the conversation. With Joe, we talked about Joe Fleming, of course. We talked about how this thing kind of broke wide open for Amo, and the math kind of made sense, of course, on a Monday morning quarterback basis. But deep down the list, but not that deep, is Walter Berbrick, who had some 3.5%, and beat two incumbent elected officials. All right, you can come to me now. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Dan.
I've never done this.
Yeah.
Walter and I had developed kind of a rap after I first met him, and never met him. He came into the radio studio and impressed me. Impressed me because of his motive, impressed me because of his seriousness, impressed me because of his resume, impressed me because of his thoughtfulness. And I thought, geez, if we have to suffer this special election because David Cicilline decided to jump ship and join the Rhode Island Foundation, maybe this would be, a flyer that the district could take with a sense of, interest and expectation. I don't know how many times I've said this, but I voted for Walter Berbrick. It was the hardest vote I've ever had as a constituent, because I thought that you would be a terrific representative in the district. At the same time, Aaron Regenberg was leading, but we knew he was, hovering around this 25% mark, which was the projected cap, really, in a race of 12 people. And for those who don't buy his act, and I'm one of those who did not buy his act, the choice was, all right, Amo or Kano, based on what our the internal numbers that were dispersed and what our gut told us. And I went to the ballot box, and enough about me here in a second, but I went to the ballot box and said, you know what? You've never strategically voted. I've never made a vote based on the juxtaposition of how this race may or may not go. I thought you're the best candidate. I voted for you. So congratulations on that. Oh, my goodness. But I always congratulate somebody when they decide to run for office. So congratulations on that. Does it feel congratulatory? Or is it a gut punch?
No, I think the former, because look, I know while we didn't win, we didn't win the primary. I've learned so much and have grown so much as a leader, as a person, in just 5 short months. Starting with the decision to run, right? And it was a gut-wrenching decision, leaving a job that I've been in for 15 years, making such an impact, such a difference, educating, and I always tell people the Naval War College is a national treasure. Being able to educate our nation's leaders, being able to bring leaders from across our government, the military, the intelligence community, the interagency, members of Congress, our allies and partners together to examine real-world plans and to actually refine them and use those plans, for operational purposes. Plans that are being executed right now across the world. Having that impact is just, it's hard to step away from that. It really is. But an opportunity like this to serve, doesn't come around often.
So the reason, the ultimate reason why I thought it would be kind of neat to spend a little time with Walter is to talk about what you've learned.
Yeah.
We always bring the winner in, and the post-election loss from the race for dog catcher all the way to the presidency has got to be brutal in the sense that you put so much in.
Yeah.
Now, in a one-on-one race, it's even more difficult. I mean, I am sure that over the course of time, you had to have some actualized understanding that this was a long shot at best.
100%. 100%. I mean, this is, going into it, I knew I didn't have those high-level political connections. I know I didn't have the personal wealth, and I knew it was going to be a hard road. But I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we, within 5 months, right, we put together a great team, put the infrastructure in place, raised almost $200,000 in grassroots, and that's just family, friends, everyday Rhode Islanders, everyday Americans. I didn't hire a fundraiser, an official, formal fundraiser until, halfway through, and by once we started to get, into the swing of things, it was just too late, right? And so, and we didn't end up actually, spending our paid media towards a month out, which is late. And we didn't have the money, the resources to get on TV, which in a population with 81% being 55 and older, folks are sitting in front of the TV for the most part. And I think that's where Gabe's strategy was really effective.
Well, it's one of those things where last week's show with Joe Fleming, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's on WPRI.com, and you take a look at it. Here's the disappointing part about modern American politics. If you don't have the money, you can't make. You can't.
That's right.
You can't move the needle unless you are a long-term legacy established family, a long-term legacy established official
With the name recognition.
all that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, professional politicians are guided by professional consultants who do Q ratings, which is just a measurement of your name recognition, all that kind of a thing. And then there's got to be some budget that makes sense. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have ran. It's just that the headwinds are so extraordinary when someone else has the dough. Gabe Amo is a gentleman. He's a nice guy. I think he's, his resume of Smith Hill and White House was well positioned on his advertising, but he was able through his political young career to be able to shake the trees loose and to be able to generate $750,000-ish, which was enough for him to be on television. And as I wrote in my Valley Breeze column, Kano didn't have the money either, and that's where it broke. And that's why he got 32%, because there was an 8 or 10% wash when Don Carlson, who put a ton of dough into the race and had to leave on his own volition after a Target 12 report that put him in unkind stead. Those votes became available at the end. But the point of my little soliloquy here is that I would put you up against any of these candidates, and if it was a zero-based focus group, you would have won the race.
Yeah. But that's one of the biggest lessons learned is, and I knew it was going to take big money to win, and it does. And to get, you got to raise the money, you got to raise it quick, and so you've got to have those connections in place well ahead of time, and be able to hit the ground running.
Did you not? Some hard questions. Did you not know that? You're not.
No,
you're actually schooling our military on intelligence.
No.
You're intelligent.
I've I don't have those high-level political connections. I wasn't a career politician, didn't have the name recognition, didn't come from personal wealth, but I did have a pretty big network of just people who I know across, over the last 20 years serving in different capacities, friends, family, colleagues, and that was pretty one of the most important lessons as well, is just kind of never forget, the most important people in your life. Your former colleagues and friends and mentors and family, the people that really got me through this whole process. And because of their resources, their hard-earned
dollars.
By the
way, raising a couple $100,000 is not chopped liver. There's no embarrassment to that, especially in a upstart quickie race. But point is, if somebody pulled you aside, did anybody pull you aside and say you need $750,000 to succeed in this 100%.
Race? Yeah.
But you plowed through anyway.
We plowed through anyway. Again, for me, it's, once I'm all in, and I'm not going to quit, and I'm going to give it everything I can to the game.
Had you known today, check that, had you known then, 5 months ago, what you know today, would you have done it?
I would have. Because, you never know what the outcome can be, right? You never know who drops out. You never know how the tides may turn. You just don't know. Right, and
you got to play the game.
You do, and you got to have the courage to get in the arena, and I think to stay in the arena too. And again, I've learned just so much and I've grown so much over the last 5 months as a leader, as a person, as a father. And that was one of the most difficult parts of this whole process, is just being away from your family as much as you are, being away from my 2 kids, 11 and 9, my wife, and I got to sacrifice a lot, but they have to sacrifice just as much. My wife, picking up all my responsibilities, and so it's a team effort, and you can't lose sight of that.
All right, what Walter learned? He's been teasing. He's learned a lot. Let's find out what he learned when we come back to this.
I do support it, and having 12 years in the House, 12 years in the Senate, because I believe each generation has an obligation to pass the baton off to the next so that they have an opportunity to lead.
That was Walter Berbrick's answer to a quickie question in the Target, I should say the WPRI, same guys, Tim and Ted with the debate. Simple question that everybody should be ready to answer, which is, do you support term limits? And every candidate either had like a variance of 3 or 4 years or a misunderstanding of what the terms were, and you're the only guy that actually had a firm answer. I mean, was that debate prep or just common sense?
A little bit of both.
Right, but you never know you're going to get that question.
Yeah. I think, for that question specifically, I mean, that's one of the things, even knocking on doors, folks are like, what do you think about term limits? And I'm like, honestly.
Unsolicited, they would ask you those things.
Yeah. Because people are just sick and tired of the same old, folks that are in and not making a difference.
No hyperbole. Yeah. How many doors knocked?
Myself. And so after about 2 months, I transitioned from making calls almost 12 hours a day to, I was like, I got to get out there. And so myself, across the district, I knocked over 1,000 doors in 2 months.
That's like
all day. East Providence, Woonsocket.
It's a marathon.
It is.
Number of people you actually spoke to as a ratio to the doors knocked?
Probably a quarter. I'd say about a quarter. And
people aren't home.
So not only that, but what scared me the most is there's an election going on, right? And I think this election really, I think, reinforced the importance of democracy, and I think that democracy works, but it also, I think, highlighted some limitations or areas that we can strengthen our own electoral system. And that one in particular is just, especially in a special election. Presidential elections, people know what's going on for the most part, but in a special election, it's, one of the ideas I had was, and I was talking to Greg Amore about it, is, maybe
our Secretary of State
is having, U.S. Congress should kind of earmark and push down federal dollars down to the states, so we can promote special elections and elections in general, so people know that it's going on, so that they can make their voice heard. And it's so important because, again, a quarter of the folks, and I would say
horrifying how many people don't know what's going on.
Unless you're glued to your TV or listen to WPRI, right? You don't really know what's going on. Because everyone's living their life.
Yeah, one of my colleagues was at what we consider a high socioeconomic social event, cocktail party, the weekend before, and she was asking, hey, who are you voting for Congress? She said most of the people didn't know there was an election.
Yeah, scary.
So, you know, that was...
And that's the thing, right? Even our strategy, we were very, like everyone else, I think, for the most part, I think the folks who, you know, who ended up in the top 5 or 6 were very strategic about how they're going to target. And like many of them, did the super voters, right? Folks who vote in 2 or 3 primaries, Democratic primaries. But there's a whole other group of folks and all independents who also vote but don't know the election's going on.
So what you learned, the people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
For those who did and those who were, what did you learn from them?
I learned a few things. One, I think it reinforces, going into the election, we centered on kind of 3 themes, and that's rising costs, right? Rising division and rising seas. And those were the 3 themes going in. And I was surprised how many people actually care about climate change. And I think, you know, we're seeing it right now, traveling through in your own neck of the woods and traveling throughout the state.
What a week.
Yeah, it's been horrible. And, you know, there's only so much we can do only so much Congress can do, but at the state level, right, it's getting the right people and resources in place so that we can start building the next generation infrastructure that allows it to be more resilient, that allows, you know, our streets aren't getting flooded and our beaches aren't corroding and everything else. And it's a long-term
Did you have to ask about climate change, or it was unsolicited concern?
No, every single door I went to, I said, what is your number one concern? And some folks would be, you know, it's really hard to tell, but many would say, you know, just how polarizing and how divisive our politics are today, or climate change, or the cost of living. You know, it's, you know, and that was one of the most rewarding parts of this whole experience, is just getting to know people, right? And it's the older woman I met in East Providence who can't decide between putting food on the table or buying medicine.
No, it's a cliche.
But it's the God honest truth. And we met her at the which is a pretty cool event, by the way, the East Providence concert series, right there on the water. And then, you know, the younger woman in Barrington I met at the Shaws, who had to resign from her work because the cost of childcare was more than she brought home each week, right? But it was the veteran I met in Smithfield, who had to drive over an hour to get his hearing aid and pay full price for it. I'm like, what are we doing wrong here? And so, I mean, it's story after story after story that reinforces that fire in your belly to continue to serve. But then it just also reinforces, you know, the hope and generosity that folks, you know, when you knock on the door and you're different, and you explain to them your experience and your leadership, they're like, wow, finally someone who's a breath of fresh air, someone who has different ideas, someone who has experience of leading, and you're the kind of person that I'd like to vote for. So that, for me, was genuinely refreshing and rewarding. And it just continues to kind of light that fire to continue serving.
But what you don't know, when it's all said and done, is how many of those folks actually circled your name. And that's the wonder of it all. What's next for this first-time candidate when we come back? Stay with us.
And we need to reduce, and I would actually be in favor of reducing the defense budget by 10% so that we can invest in the critical things like housing, healthcare, education, the things that are really going to define whether or not we remain an economic superpower.
So anytime anybody jumps to a high-level race from nowhere, I always kind of cringe, because you may have the package, but politics being a profession in some ways, you don't jump to the Patriots, you know, right out of high school. Right. I mean, it's you got to play college ball, and you got to go to rookie camp, and then you got to do those things. So the equivalent might be state rep, state senator, that kind. Public service still in your difference between you've been in public service your entire career, and for that we thank you, and people should. Running for office again?
Yeah, I mean having spent 15 years in federal service, you can't run for any partisan office or even engage in any partisan politics, which is why I haven't run for anything. And
again, emphasis, you had to leave that to do this.
So I had to resign from 15 years
Not
of
going
federal
back
service.
to Naval War College, don't know?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been the kind of person that kind of answers the call, right? And wherever I think I can make the greatest impact and make the greatest difference, whether that's for our country, for our state, and obviously taking care of the family. And I honestly don't know what that looks like yet.
So you're gonna have to find another gig. But does your mind tell you you'd like to get back into the action of running for office again, or is it or does the circumstances have to be ripe? In other words, are you able to think about it now?
Yeah. I think I didn't anticipate running for this office, and I would never close the door in the future. And it's something I want to just continue to serve and make a difference. And I think I can do that in Congress, and I think I can do that in other ways. And so we'll see what the future holds, but at this point, I just want to continue to roll up my sleeves, make a difference, either at the federal level or in some other capacity.
At the end of the day, with all these things you learned and observed, what's the one acute takeaway?
Relationships matter, and I think those relationships and the people who are most important to you, that you develop those relationships over time, whether that's at a higher level in political office, your experiences, your family, friends. At the end of the day, they help me in this case get through that process. But I think there's also an opportunity here to running to get your voice out there and to get your ideas out there, because I ran a race based on honest, pragmatic politics. Someone who can bring a different level of integrity.
But no gimmick and nothing that people went,
Yeah.
And you know what? You stayed true to yourself.
Yep, that's it.
And you know what? It's your first 3%. It may not be your last.
That's right.
I'm glad you're in the race.
Thanks, sir.
Good to have met you. And
Appreciate
thanks
you.
for your service to the country.
Thank you.
Walter Berbrick. You think this is easy? Think again. Final word. So this congressional race is not over, unless you're being practical about it. In a blue district, the Democrat is obviously in such a position, it would take a near miracle for Gary Leonard, the Republican, to make any headway here. He also, an unknown, he also having served the country, thank you to him, he also doesn't have a strategy. We've asked for him to show up, radio or TV, not yet. We'll try and see if there's going to be a real race. We'll see you next week.